There is a white powder sitting on a shelf at your local hardware store right now that can cut the heat coming through your roof by more than half. It costs less than $2 for enough to cover the average home. It has been doing this exact job since before the Roman Empire, cooling buildings across the ancient world through summers that hit the same temperatures we complain about today, and it did it without a single wire, without a single unit, without a single monthly bill attached to it. The paint industry in the United States alone is worth over $60 billion a year. The cooling and air conditioning market adds another $100 billion on top of that. And quietly buried inside both of those industries is a material so simple, so cheap, and so effective at keeping buildings cool that it would collapse demand for both premium exterior paints and supplemental cooling systems in one summer if enough people used it. They have not told you about it. Not in an ad, not on a label, not once. Stay with me. Because what happened to this material and who made sure it disappeared from mainstream building practice is a story that only makes sense when you follow the money, and the number you are about to hear is the reason it will make you angry. The global exterior paint and coatings market is worth approximately $160 billion as of 2024. Cool roof technologies, which is the official name for products that reflect sunlight away from buildings, represent a fast-growing segment worth several billion more on top of that. A 2021 study by the Lawrence Berkeley National Laboratory found that applying a highly reflective coating to a roof in a hot climate reduces cooling energy use by between 15 and 40% depending on the building. That is not a rounding error. That is a meaningful slice of an electricity bill every single month for the full life of the coating. Now add this detail, which the same study included without drawing attention to it. The most reflective commercially available coatings perform at roughly the same level as hydrated lime whitewash, a material that has existed since antiquity, a material you can buy in a paper bag for under $2. The industry did not sideline this because it failed. It was quietly pushed aside because it worked so well that no one could ever own it, trademark it, or charge you to reapply it every season. You cannot patent calcium. You cannot put a logo on sunlight bouncing off a white wall. You cannot build a $60 billion coating industry on a powder your great-grandparents bought by the sack. But stay here, because the science behind why this white powder does what it does is more interesting than the story of how it got buried. And once you understand what is actually happening at the surface of your roof on a summer afternoon, you will never look at a dark shingle the same way again. This is not a new discovery. The ancient Egyptians whitewashed the outer walls of granaries and storage buildings with a lime-based wash more than 3,000 years ago. Not because they thought it looked nice, because they learned from direct experience that the food inside stayed cooler, lasted longer, and survived the summer without rotting. The Greeks did the same thing to their island villages, covering stone walls with a brilliant white finish that visitors still see today on Santorini and Mykonos. Those are not decorative choices. They are survival engineering that has been maintained continuously for over 2,000 years because stopping made things worse. The Romans carried the practice across their entire empire. A Roman engineer named Vitruvius, writing around 25 BC, described specific lime mixtures for exterior walls in hot climates. His text was copied by hand across 1,000 years of European history because builders who used it got results. Medieval Spanish towns whitewashed entire neighborhoods in a tradition called encalado that ran unbroken from Roman times, straight into the 20th century, not as a cultural habit, but as a proven tool against summer heat. 2,000 years of consistent, documented, observable results, passed from builder to builder because it worked every single time. The reason this matters to you today is something you have already felt with your own body. You have seen it every summer, you just never connected it to the bill sitting on your kitchen table. Stay here, because where this physics shows up in your everyday life is closer than you think. And once you see it, you cannot unsee it. You have seen this your whole life and never connected the dots. When you walk out of a shaded alley into full sun and feel the difference on your skin in 2 seconds, that is solar heat striking you directly. When you touch a black car hood in August and it burns your palm, but a white car in the same parking lot is just warm, that is the same force, doing the same thing to 2 different surfaces. When you have noticed that the top floor of a house is always hotter than the ground floor, even with the air conditioning running, that is because whatever is on your roof is absorbing the sun's energy all day long and conducting that heat directly down through your ceiling into the air you are trying to cool. Your air conditioner is not fighting the summer. It is fighting your roof. A dark, rough shingle surface absorbs more than 90% of the sunlight hitting it and converts it to heat. A bright white lime-coated surface sends up to 85% of that same sunlight back into the sky before it ever becomes heat inside your home. The gap between those 2 numbers is what your compressor is running all day trying to close. Most people who try this get one detail wrong before they even start. It is a mistake you cannot see while you're making it. You only discover it 2 or 3 weeks later when the coating begins to crack, lift at the edges, and fall off in chips the size of your thumbnail. Before you go get your materials, you need to know exactly what that mistake looks like and how simple it is to avoid it. Because it is the reason most people who have tried this once said it did not work and never tried again. Here is what you need. I want to be honest with you about every number. Hydrated lime, also sold as slaked lime or calcium hydroxide. This is the powder. You will find it in the masonry section, not the paint aisle. A 50-pound bag costs between $8 and $12 at most hardware stores. That is enough to coat a surface the size of a 2-car garage roof with 4 full coats. If you want to start with a smaller test, some stores carry 5-pound bags for under $2. That is the material, that is the entire product, a 5-gallon bucket. Most hardware stores sell these for around $2. You may already own one. Water from your tap, a wide masonry brush or an old paintbrush with stiff bristles. A 4-inch masonry brush runs about $3 if you do not have one. A garden pump sprayer works even better for large flat surfaces and costs around $12 if you do not already own one. That is genuinely it. Here is the one thing most people get wrong. They mix the powder too thick. When they apply it, it goes on smooth. It dries white and bright. It looks exactly right. And they feel good about it. Then the sun heats the surface for several days in a row. Then the temperature drops at night. Then it rises again the next day. And on day 10 or day 18, the surface starts to show a web of thin cracks, like the bottom of a dried up lake. Then whole sections begin to lift and fall. It looks like the coating failed. It looks like the method does not work. What actually happened is that a coating applied too thick becomes rigid once it cures. Rigid coatings on surfaces that expand in heat and contract in cold will always crack. Always. The fix is completely simple. Your mix should look like thin skim milk, not like paint. When you hold a loaded brush above the bucket, the liquid should drip off in a fast, easy stream. If it drips like paint from a brush, add more water. If it looks nearly clear, add a small scoop of powder. You are aiming for just barely cloudy. That mix, applied in multiple thin layers, does not crack. It bonds. Start by cleaning the surface you're going to coat. This step matters more than any other step in the whole process. Any loose debris, any flaking old material, any dirt, moss, algae, or chalky residue from a previous coating needs to come off completely before you apply anything. Use a stiff brush and scrub it. Use a pressure washer if you have one. Whatever method you use, get to clean, firm, solid surface, then let it dry for at least 2 full dry days before you begin. A clean, dry surface is what lets the lime actually grip the material underneath. If you apply it over contamination or dampness, the coating bonds to the contamination, not to the roof. And when the contamination lets go, your coating goes with it. Mix your lime in the bucket. Start with roughly half a cup of the powder. Add about 2 quarts of water. That is less powder than your instinct will tell you to use. Stir it thoroughly. It should look like watered down milk with a slight cloudiness. If it looks as thick as paint, add more water. If it looks nearly clear, add another small scoop of powder and stir again. Once it looks right, do a small test patch on a corner of your surface. Let that patch dry all the way. It should dry to a flat, chalky white with no shine. Press your finger to it. If it rubs away like loose dust, the mix is still slightly too thin. Add just a touch more powder. If it holds firm under your finger but still feels like chalk, that is exactly where you want to be. Now apply your first coat. Use long overlapping strokes, moving in one direction across the surface, then going back over the same area in the perpendicular direction. Think of drawing a grid over the surface, one direction first, then crossing it. This cross-hatching fills any spots the first pass missed and gives you even coverage. Watch the edges, gutters, and any low points where the liquid can pool. Go back and brush those out before they dry. A pooled drip that dries becomes a raised ridge. A ridge does not reflect heat upward. It scatters it sideways. You want a flat, even surface pointing straight up at the sky. Pay close attention to what comes next. Because the number of coats is not a finishing detail, it is the mechanism. This is the step most people skip, and it is the only reason the method fails for some people and holds perfectly for others. One coat does almost nothing. This is the truth that no one says clearly enough. One coat is a film sitting on top of a surface. It will wash off in the first rain. It will crack in the first heat cycle. You will think the method is broken. It is not broken. It is incomplete. You need 4 coats minimum on most surfaces. Some porous surfaces like bare concrete or clay tile need 6. Let each coat dry fully before you apply the next. On a warm, dry day, each coat dries in about an hour. On a humid day, give it 2 hours. Do not rush this. The drying time is not about the water evaporating. It is about the lime beginning to cure, which is a slow chemical process where it reacts with carbon dioxide in the air and starts forming tiny interlocking crystals. Each coat you add bonds into the previous coat as it cures. By coat 4, you do not have 4 layers stacked on top of each other. You have one continuous crystalline structure bonded into the surface below. Press your finger hard against a fully cured 4-coat surface and it will feel almost like pressing on tile. That is the coating you're building. A single thick coat is a film. 4 thin coats are armor. After your final coat goes on, give the surface 72 hours before you walk on it if it is a roof. The full reflective benefit builds over the first week as the surface continues to cure and whiten. After 7 days, test it with your hand alone. In direct sun, hold your palm 1 inch above a coated area and then 1 inch above an uncoated area right next to it. The temperature difference you feel is real, and it is the same difference your air conditioner no longer has to compensate for. The gap will feel similar to the difference between holding your hand above white sand at the beach versus holding it above dark asphalt in the same summer sun. One is manageable. One is an oven. Your roof has been an oven every summer you have lived there. Now, let that sit for a moment. One household using this method through a full hot summer on a flat or low-slope roof over a space they are actively cooling will reduce their cooling load enough to save somewhere between $60 and $120 a month, depending on their climate and their current bill. Over a full summer, that adds up to several $100s that stay in a pocket instead of going to a utility company. Scale that to a family of 4 running central air all season, and the savings approach $500 or more before fall. 10 families on the same block doing this changes the heat coming off that block. The air directly above 10 white roofs is measurably cooler than the air above 10 dark ones. This is not speculation. Cities that have piloted large-scale cool roof programs have recorded ambient air temperature drops of 1 to 2 degrees Fahrenheit across the treated areas. 1 or 2 degrees sounds small. Over a city block in August, it means every air conditioner on that block runs a shorter cycle every single time it kicks on. 100 homes doing this across a neighborhood is not just 100 individual decisions. It is a structural change to how that neighborhood handles heat. It requires no grid upgrade, no permit process, no infrastructure, no request to a utility company, no waiting list, a bag of powder, a bucket, water from the tap, and the time it takes to coat a surface in a weekend. No bills, no infrastructure, no asking anyone's permission. This method works best on flat and low-pitch roofs. It bonds well to concrete, stone, clay tile, and bare or painted wood. It does not hold reliably to asphalt shingles that have a heavy granular surface texture. The rough, loose granules prevent the lime from bonding to anything solid, and the coating will start separating within a few weeks. On steep, granulated shingle roofs, skip this method entirely for the roof surface and focus on any flat sections, outbuildings, garages, or sheds. In very rainy climates, the coating fades and washes gradually and will need to be refreshed once a year. In dry, hot, sunny climates, a proper 4 to 6 coat application can hold for 2 to 3 years before it needs any attention. On the question of legality, the title is honest. A number of states and a very large number of homeowners associations have rules about exterior color or finish that effectively prohibit bright white coatings on surfaces visible from the street. These are not scientific bans. They are aesthetic regulations that happen to cost the homeowner real money in energy bills every single summer. For flat roofs, back structures, and any surface not subject to street visibility rules, you are clear to proceed in virtually every jurisdiction. Check your specific HOA documents and local codes before applying to anything visible from the street. Everything else is yours to do. The buildings on Santorini are still white. They have been white for longer than any living structure in the modern world has existed. Every summer that has come in off the Aegean, every afternoon with the sun directly overhead and the stone hot enough to burn bare feet, those walls have sent the heat back where it came from, not with a thermostat, not with a compressor, not with a bill that arrives the first of every month. The Romans whitewashed their storehouses, the Spanish whitewashed their villages, the Egyptians whitewashed their granaries. Yours will do the same. The chemistry was always there. It was just waiting for someone to open the bag. I do not know what brought you here. It does not matter. It works either way.